This is your host, Tim Winders. This is another great episode. I'll introduce you to the guest in just a moment. But if you've ever thought that you should write a book or ever thought that you need to have more authority in whatever your chosen field is, today is an episode that you need to listen to. We'll get to our guest in just a moment. First thing I'd like to do is just say welcome. This is the place where the seekers, the goers, and the creators come to hang out. We say that we like to redefine success in leadership, business, and ministry right here at Seek, Go, Create. I welcome everyone. If you're watching on YouTube, welcome. If you're listening on podcast, welcome. Or if you're catching us on any of the socials, thank you for being here. We love it when people engage with us beyond the actual episodes. So please, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you're on one of the socials, jump down in the comments, say hello, let us know you're here, ask questions, give us some thoughts, agree, disagree, whatever. We're good with all of that. If you're on our podcast, one of the best things you could do is go over to our website, seekgocreate.com. That's seekgocreate.com. And you can go to each episode page. We've got extensive and detailed notes and resources for our guest. We've got an outline for each episode there. And you can also go down and add comments. And so make sure that you check that out. If you've never been to our website before, make sure you give us your best email address so that you can stay in contact and be notified when we have new episodes and new information that you may want to check out. So thank you for doing all that. Let's get rolling today. We have Michelle Prince as our guest today. And Michelle and I were just chatting before we got on. I was connected to her. I've known her longer than she's known me. Let's just say it that way. Because when I first started listening to podcasts a few years ago, she was a guest on one of the podcasts I listened to, and we'll get to that in just a moment. She's the best-selling author of Winning in Life Now and is a highly sought-after Ziglar motivational speaker. Anyone that knows me, that's been around this podcast, know I'm a huge Zig Ziglar fan. She's gone on to author dozens of additional books and products in the areas of achievement, motivation, productivity, and success. She owns a publishing company and is the founder of the Book Bound Workshops, which helps soon-to-be authors get their story out of their head and onto paper. That's cool. We're going to talk about that. She knows we all have a story, and she's passionate about helping others tell their stories so they can impact other people's lives. Michelle, welcome to Seek, Go, Create.
Hey there. Thank you for having me, Tim. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. And so I gave you a warning on this. First question I like to ask. And there's so much more on your bio I could have gone over. You've got such a rich background and so many things you've done, but we just bump into each other. We're either on a Zoom call or we're actually out in the real world. And I say, Michelle, what do you do? What do you typically tell people?
Well, I typically tell them, well, first of all, I'm a mom and a wife, and but I own a training development company. I help people to really just discover who they already are and get it out there in a way through telling their story, writing books, getting it out there, and building a platform. And a few other things here and there too, but that's kind of the gist of it.
All right. So I want to dive into one thing you mentioned first, because it's something that I don't want to say I wrestle with, but I hear it all the time. Do you really believe that everyone has a story?
I do. And the reason, my take on story is everybody has a story, because everybody in that story, by the way, was given to us as a gift, right? And good or bad, whatever our story is, whatever we've been through in life, it's just kind of who we are. And if it's a gift, gifts are meant to be given away. And so I do believe everyone has a story. Most people don't think they do, but everyone's been through something that can help someone else personally or professionally. And that's what our stories are meant for.
Yeah, I love that. And I agree. I was just trying to get you, I was kind of trying to get your attention as we get started here. So,
I love it.
so, all right, let's kind of park that topic for just a moment, because we're going to come back to that, because my observation from doing research is that is one of your giftings, is to help pull that story out of people. and you've got a lot of tools in place, events and other things to do that. And so, what I'm going to do for the person listening, we're going to come back to that, because if you're listening and you want to know how to pull that story out, we're going to get to that shortly. But what I really want to do, Michelle, is I like to I love stories, so I love to hear what people's stories are. And I know that you've got connections. We were talking right before we went online. We have connections with so many people, but one of the biggest names that comes up with you, I think we need to go there first, is Zig Ziglar, who's a legend in all of the world. And if someone's listening and they don't know who Zig Ziglar is, shame on you, but check it out. But first thing I want to do, Michelle, is I want you to tell the audience who Zig is for the person that may not know,
Mm.
and then just unfold your story for us. And I might dig a little deeper as we go along.
Absolutely. Well, Zig Ziglar, like you said, he's a legend. He's changed more people's lives than anyone that I know, and he's just a beacon of light and hope. And it started with sales training, but he has written, over 30 books to help people just to be their best self in whatever area it is, personally, professionally. I had the privilege of meeting him when I was 18 years old. And it's a long story. I won't go into all the details, but my parents kind of forced me to go to one of his seminars. And it was actually my graduation gift from high school, which I was not too thrilled about. But I went to this seminar, it changed my life. And it was then that I just knew some way, somehow I was going to, and I know this sounds a little bold to think, but at the time I'm thinking, I'm going to work for this guy one day. And in fact, I felt it so much that I told him that at this seminar. But it was literally almost 5 years to the day later that I ended up working for Zig. And it's a very serendipitous, divine appointment that happened. I didn't sit down and plan how I was going to go work for Zig, but I did. And it was just the beginning of an incredible time in my life. It was the beginning of my career. And it literally laid the foundation for everything that I know professionally, but then just personally, he's made a huge impact on me, and very, very, very blessed to have had that opportunity to work for him.
So 18 years old. All right. Now I'm thinking back to when I was 18. And I would like to think I was fairly ambitious and thinking big and things like that. First of all, I do want to say, knowing what I know about Zig, and I never met him face to face. I was in seminars and saw him, and actually saw him late in his life. That was really powerful. I think his daughter was with him when he was speaking at that time. But knowing Zig, an 18-year-old walking up to him and boldly proclaiming, "I'm going to work with you," I can just imagine the grin on his face.
He did. He did. I mean, and that's just who he was. He was the most gracious man you've ever met, but he did. He just kind of smiled. He didn't say anything. He just shook his head. He smiled. And yeah, it's so funny to remember that because it feels like yesterday, but it was a long time ago.
So yeah, I know that was a long time ago, but I really like to understand mindset, because we all have these events in our life that
Mhm.
we may not know them at the time, but when we look back on them, we see that they literally impacted the trajectory or the journey that we go on. My guess is that seminar had a big impact on where you ended up going, and obviously you professed something strongly. But I mean, were you, this is going back a few years. I know you're super young, but a few years when high school, would you consider yourself like a positive mental attitude person? Were you typical teen? Were you, I don't want to say rebellious or any of that kind of stuff? How would you describe you as a teenager going into that Zig Ziglar seminar?
Well, that's a great question. So I was a good girl. I wasn't doing horrible things, but I definitely had a chip on my shoulder and an attitude, especially toward my parents. And I think that might have been what fueled the desire for them to send me to maybe come back with a little bit of a better attitude. But yes, I think I've always generally been a positive person. It's just kind of part of my personality, my disc profile, if you know anything about that. But I knew nothing about personal development, or really just even that whole world until I went to that seminar. I knew my parents read those books. I knew they had went to seminars, but I didn't really have. In fact, I didn't even know the word passion at the time when I left that event because I loved it. I mean, I really absorbed everything. I I just was so excited about it, but I didn't even know that that's what it was at the time. And truthfully, Tim, it wasn't until years and years later, even after, long after working at Ziglar, because I left Ziglar to pursue and that's another long story, but to pursue a career in software sales. And it just never occurred to me what a big impact it had on me. I knew working for Zig was a big deal to me. I didn't know it was a big deal really to anyone else. I didn't know how it was going to shape all of my thoughts, all of my interactions. It made a huge impact on me, but I didn't know it at the time. It was definitely later looking back. I'm like, wow, that affected this decision and that relationship and big
I,
influence.
I mean, listen, let me just go ahead and tell the listener that they need to get a copy of See You at the Top. That if
Yes.
they haven't read that, there's probably a tons of other things, but that'll kind of be there if they've never been exposed to Zig. I actually love the old audios of Zig to listen to them. We used to listen to them on cassette tapes and things like that.
Yes.
I just dated myself. I'm sorry. I know people may be listening going cassette tapes, but man, I used to love to hear him talk about the redhead and all that. Anyway, but my wife and I really love those. But I love the discussion about Zig and all that he impacted because I think as we kind of continue to build upon all that you do and what you provide for people, it really is just this fascinating layering of a foundation of things that Zig set up years ago. What did you exactly do when you went to work for the the Zig Corp? I'll call it. You know the
Well, when I was 18 and I professed that I was going to work for him one day, in my mind, it was to be a speaker. But just out of college with 6 months copier sales experience lands you a sales job, which ended up being the best experience ever. So I was literally making a difference in people's lives every day. And that's kind of how I looked at it. Of course, I was in sales, but it was whether someone was buying a book or a cassette tape back in the day, or they were, hiring the company to do some training or bringing Zig in to speak. We were making a difference in the lives of people. So, and I was young. I was 22 years old or something like that, and very ambitious and very competitive. So I, wanted to be top in sales, and but yeah, so I was in sales for Ziglar for about 3.5, almost 4 years.
Excellent. And one of the things I know that you moved to, it seems, and you even mentioned it at 18, you kind of had that gene that you wanted to get the microphone and get up on stage and speak. When's the first time you recall having that thought? Was it how much before 18?
Honestly, never.
Oh,
But I've always gravitated toward leadership positions, whether it was captain of my drill team or, in college, I was president of my sorority. I've always gravitated toward being with people and leading people, I would say. So, but the speaking really honestly didn't occur to me until long after I worked at Ziglar. I mean, I think, okay, I'll be honest. Secretly, I long to do that. It's just like, oh my goodness, wouldn't it be amazing to be a speaker for Ziglar? But I was, so young, no experience. But it wasn't until so then I left, went to pursue something else, and years later I went to a Women of Faith conference, which is one of these huge conferences. They go, or they don't. I don't think they do them anymore, but they used to go all around and in coliseums, so huge, thousands and thousands of people. And I'm there one time with one of my college girlfriends, and I remember, I'll never forget it. I remember looking down at the speakers on the stage and saying to my friend, "Oh my gosh, wouldn't you just love to be a speaker at an event like this?" Or, and she looked at me with this disgust and she was like, "Michelle, you couldn't pay me $1 million to stand on that stage, let alone open my mouth." And it was in that moment I was like, really? Like, really? Like, you wouldn't want to do that? And then it really occurred to me, wow, well, maybe there is something, we all have gifts. And I was never afraid of it. It got me excited. And it was a few years after that I actually wrote my first book and launched my business. But I, I, I wish I could say I had this grand plan and it started when I was really young. It's just, all these doors just kept opening up and kept kind of following what, my passions and my giftings.
yeah. Well, I can totally relate to that because growing up, I would go into a room, and sometimes you don't know if I'm sure this is not your thought process. You don't know if it's a delusional thing. It's like, I should lead these people. They
Mm,
need help. They need leadership. Or, oh, look, there's a stage there. I should go step up there and say a few words just to encourage and uplift people. I I kind of went through that for the longest period of time. I've kind of backed away from it just because of I've shared it on the podcast before, some failures we went through in business and
mm,
kind of questioned.
yeah.
But now I'm feeling that again. Did you ever go through a time that you doubted that that's what you were called to do? Maybe a time of, I hate to use the word failure. I think it's all learning, but
Mhm.
anything like that that you learned, it's like, let me question this path I'm going along.
A million times, and probably even this morning. I mean, I think it's just I feel like that's just part of life. But yes, the answer is yes. I mean, there were so many times when I first started my own business and wrote my book and really kind of launched into the speaking. I didn't know what I was doing. I was literally just following, you know, the prompting, and I thought I knew what I was doing, and I made a lot of mistakes. I didn't know how to run a business. I knew how to speak about things that I was passionate about, but I really didn't know. I made a lot of mistakes in building a business, and so yeah, that kind of hurt. But then I always look at it as, but then there's someone else who's probably a step or two behind me, that if I'm open and say to them, look, this isn't as easy as I thought it was, and here's some of the things that I had to learn. Here's why I had to hire a coach. Here's what I did that was maybe a little bit different. If it helps shorten their learning curve, then it's worth sharing. So um, I've answered that question a different way, I think, than you intended. But the answer is yes. I
Yeah.
have definitely doubted, and but I think that's just, I think we all do to some degree.
Well, there was a time that I think my mindset was maybe even at a dangerous place where
Mm,
I didn't have doubts. I didn't, because sometimes that can be a little bit dangerous. You hear people say, "Oh, I've got no fear," and all that kind of stuff. Which, the maybe the more mature we get in life, we realize, you do need a little bit of that just for, I guess, humility purposes or something like that. But does that
That's
make
you bring
sense?
up a good point. Totally. And in fact, I can relate to that. If I think back to, so I've been in business about 12 years. And when I first started, like I said, I was so naive and so excited. Like, I mean, I would have done anything, spoken to any group, helped anybody, coach anyone for free, because I just loved it. And I really felt like I was using my gifts. But then, you know what? That's interesting you say that, because a couple of years into it, I think I got I started attending groups and masterminds and trainings, which is all wonderful, not saying a bad thing. But I do think it kind of led me down a different path, maybe a different ambition, than what it started as for me. And so there was actually a point a couple of years in that I literally had to, all those years I'm like running and running and running to build and build and build and build. And in all of those cases, I felt like God was calling me to do that. But then there was a period where I felt like I was told just to stop, stop running, stop chasing the wind, stop, just let it happen. And I did. I pulled back from a lot of things, and I guess you could call that a mistake, because I do believe fully that I was probably chasing the wrong things. But redirecting and all that, but it's all part of my story. It's just part of my journey, and you know
Yeah.
we all go through
Well,
things like that.
that's really good. And just so you know, if I look down here, you can kind of see my eyes. I'm actually making notes because I get word triggers when I'm
Mm,
having conversations like this. And I've got my notes where I did research on you. I rarely get to them because I have these triggers that go off. I consider them the Holy Spirit.
mhm,
Uh, you know,
mhm.
whatever. Some people may think
Yes.
differently, but and I wrote down three things. So I'm going to kind of let you know where I think we may be going.
Okay.
One, I wanted to ask you about being a female in this industry. We'll get to that in just a second,
Mm,
so don't answer it just yet. The other, I want to ask you about your faith because you've brought it up a few times, and we don't shy away from that here
mhm,
on this show. And so I want to ask a little bit about that. But you just said something, you talked about chasing.
Mhm.
And I wrote down the word copy because you mentioned going into masterminds. I've done the same thing. We get into this world, and especially now with social media, Michelle,
Mhm.
to where we think we want to create something that looks like Zig's business, or some
Mhm.
friends of ours business, or Joe Rogan, or any. I mean, we can name names all we
Mhm.
want, but then after a period of time, that starts shifting. So, would you
Mhm.
say that you were modeling your business after something? I don't want to say copy because that doesn't actually sound healthy, but I mean, does that make sense? In other words, we kind
Totally.
of get in this imitation business instead of
Mhm.
uh, creating our
Authentic.
own thing. Yeah, authentic.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Talk
Yes.
about that a little bit, because I think it's important later when we talk about how people come up with their own story. So let's dig a little deeper here.
Yeah, no, and this is a great thing to dig into because it is very easy, and especially in the world of training and speaking. I mean, it's a small little world, but we're all trying to do the same thing. We want to make a difference. We want to help people make an impact. But yet, then there's some that have been doing it longer, and they have models. And first you do this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and they're all great. And there's no lack of things for us to do, right? It's just a
Mhm.
matter of figuring out what is it that is really authentic for you. And I think in the beginning I just wanted to, swipe and deploy. Let's replicate it. If it's working here, let's go. I'm going to do it. I'm going to build it. I'm going to do this campaign and that campaign. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I think what I realized is, number one, you have to associate with people that have similar values and similar dreams and goals. And I think most people who want to speak and train, they do. They want to help people. I found that after a couple of years of going out to so many different places and coaches and things like that, that I realized that really where my DNA is, my messages is really more around Ziglar. And it's not just with Ziglar, but it's those, what those foundational principles are. Those are very important to me. And could I be, and I think I was, when I was running after certain things and trying to build this and grow the business and all that, I don't know how authentic I was being anymore, because the passion wasn't there as much. And so it started as this light of just, so excited that I'm being led to do, what I felt like I was called to do, all of a sudden became very stressful, and it just wasn't what I thought it was. And so, but that was actually the greatest gift for me, because it was a time in my life where I stepped back and it's like, now what? Wait a minute. Now what do I really want from what? Not what can I do? What do you want me to be doing, Lord? I mean, not. I'm tired of following my own advice. Like, help me. um, and I don't know if anyone can relate to this at all, but and I'm doing it every day. It's not like I have it figured out. I think we're all trying to do that. But authenticity is a word that I use a lot. It's really, really important. And authenticity doesn't mean that you're just vulnerable and you share every detail of your life, but it is just, figuring out who you are, what do you stand for, and putting your stake in the ground in that a little bit, so that you will attract other people who are like you versus chasing other people who may or may not be like you.
Yeah, I love that. You know what's interesting? I'm of an age that words like authentic, intentional, I do not recall. I mean, I've been around self-improvement. I first probably was exposed to Zig in like 1990 or something like that, and was around multi-level marketing businesses where really fed from a lot of that. And I actually did corporate training as early as the early 90s, late 80s. And I do not ever recall hearing those words in those
Mm.
circles. I don't recall, Michelle, and this is going to be a question here. I don't recall hearing the words really until the last maybe 5, 7 years ago. Do
Mhm.
you remember, with all your experience, when's the first time you heard people talking about being authentic?
That's a great question. Thinking back to the 90s and that time period where training and development and that's really when Zig was rising bigger than ever, and there's so many other big names that everyone would recognize. The big motivational events that were all around the country, that one thing I do remember working for Zig and hearing, never out of his mouth, but just kind of, it was like a known thing, was that certain people behave differently behind closed doors than others, right? Or certain people are not necessarily exactly the way they are on the stage as they are off the stage. And having the privilege of working for Zig, I remember thinking, wow, Zig is actually better off the stage than he is on the stage. So I mean, like, I didn't have a different role model example. So the word never came up, but I know it was people sensed it, right? People can sense things. And I think I talk about it mostly because I mean, all you can be is yourself, right? And I think I tried for years to be somebody else. I was always a people pleaser, and it's usually when you kind of break through, like, well, no, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. It's usually when you start making a bigger impact in people. But I think what people are attracted to isn't necessarily you. It's just you being real. It's why everyone loves Zig. He never stood up there and was perfect. I mean, yes. Now let me tell you, he read 4 hours a day. He practiced, 3 hours before every speech, and yes, he had it down to a science, but it came from a place of authenticity. And I think that's why people really connected with him. And it was his stories. It was not saying, look how great I am. It was, let me tell you what I've been through. Let me tell you why I'm just like you. And I think if the word wasn't said, I think they felt it, right? They felt sincerity, they felt authenticity. And I think we crave it maybe now, Tim, because of the world we're in with technology. Maybe we crave it more than we did back then because we sense there isn't a lot of authenticity online.
Yeah, and
Maybe.
one thing that's intriguing about it, there was a word that I wrote down that I don't know if because I'm a child of the 80s, go, 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 greed is good, all that type
Mhm.
stuff. But I wrote down the word impress. It seems as if a lot of, and maybe I was wired this way, maybe it was something that I need to work through, but speaking, uh, some of the businesses I did, a lot of the people that I was around, it seems like they were more interested in impressing than being
Mm,
authentic.
yeah.
And it seems as if we're flushing, or at least some circles are flushing that out
Hmm.
now. Now, I do agree some people are
Agree.
like they're going down the authentic rabbit hole, and they're kind of like going the hot mess route is what I call it, where it's
Yeah.
like they want to show their messes and all that. And I don't know that I like that either. I think I'm on this age group though, where maybe we tried to impress and
Yes.
and we need to learn how to be authentic. My wife and I have these discussions all the time. It's like, what do we share with our social media? It's like, hey, we live in an RV. We are
Hmm.
essentially nomads. We're homeless. We need to probably share that with people. Maybe it'd be cool and all that. But
Yeah.
anyway, I think a lot of people in that world were trying to impress,
Hmm.
and I use the word hypocrite. They were not, their words and actions didn't line up. They weren't the same all the time. You may have mentioned that. So you were about to say something.
Well, we're in the same era. So I was a child of the 80s as well. And I think I never would have thought about that, but I think you're right. I mean, that was definitely the era of success and building and working for big companies. And I remember some of my favorite movies, Secrets of My Success and some of those, where it's being successful, which I think in a lot of people's minds was perfect, or they had it all orchestrated and and I do think it's just the timing. Life over the last, I'd say, 15 years or so, people, I mean, who would have ever thought of taking selfies, 20 years ago, or videos or things like this? Because you didn't do that. You didn't let people see that side of you unless you were family, right? Otherwise you had your perfection and your appearance of like, you've got it all figured out. And that's where maybe things have shifted. And maybe that's where people feel more compelled to share their story, and their story is never going to be that they have it all figured out and that they're perfect. And I just think people relate to that. I know me personally, I connect more with someone who stands up there and says, I don't have it all figured out. I'm not, I'm still on this journey. I'm like, okay, that person's just like me. And I think that's what we all want.
Yeah, I was recently in, I might have been Clubhouse or something, and I was telling a co-moderator, I said, you know what? We don't need to present ourselves as experts. We're just facilitating the conversation.
Mm,
And I
that's
think
good.
there's this line that people cross where they move into quote unquote expert guru status,
Hmm.
whereas maybe we just pull information together and listen. I know that there's a lot of wisdom to be gleaned from a lot of people, but boy, we need to, I guess that word humility is a great word. All right.
Mhm.
I've got two other words here that I want to get to, but I want to frame this in kind of a different way.
Okay.
My wife and I, we are first time grandparents. I know you've got two sons, and also this is a few years down the road for you, but let me just tell you, game changer, just so you know. And it's a granddaughter. And one of the things that we think about kind of relates to what we were just talking about is what type of world is she going to grow up in? We can still remember a world where we were offline and disconnected. People growing up now, they're not going to have that. And I'm going to layer this with some heavy stuff. Okay, Michelle. So I'm going to let you, and then I'm just going to kind of wind you up and let you go. She's also a female.
Mm,
I know that as a male, there are certain things that are different for you in the business world than they are for me. I'm not trying to present either one of us as a victim or anything,
okay.
but I know that's the case. So I would love for you to speak to, I'm almost asking you to talk to my granddaughter for me and just
Mm,
give her, this is what to expect. This is what things may be like.
mm,
And kind of growing up with just some of the things we just talked about with authenticity. So, and I also want to allow you to tie your faith into it because
mm.
I could tell that faith has been important. So, did I pile on too much for you there? You can
No
handle it.
pressure, just the life of your granddaughter, and her trajectory is all in my hands right now. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no
No
pressure. No,
pressure, no pressure.
just be authentic. Be
No, I'm
authentic when
kidding.
you do it. Not.
Yeah. Well, wow. No one has ever really asked me anything like that, but that's a great question, because I feel very blessed to be a woman. I mean, I think that especially anyone born now, and I agree, and even with kids who are, I have a 17-year-old and a 21-year-old. They're the life that we knew in the 80s and what was possible for women and what was expected of women has changed so much that I feel like there's more opportunity now for women than ever before. That's not a cliche. I happen to believe that, every single human being has the ability to make an impact in this world, male or female. And we just bring different gifts. So, I would say to just be proud to figure out who you are, whose you are, what you stand for early in life. I was a people pleaser for way too long, and I don't think I had that figured out until I was, a little bit older. But I feel like someone in this generation, you don't have to be anybody other than who you are, and should be no fear, no shame in that, and just to own it and be proud of that. But more importantly, just figure out the why you're here, because and especially as believers, we are here for a reason, we are here for a purpose. And um, I know I talk about writing books. It has nothing to do with books. It's all about figuring out your story, which is really a gift from God. And it's part of our purpose on earth, is to share who we are with other people. We're the body of Christ. So that would be my advice to her or to anyone, is the sooner you can really get clear on that, the happier you're going to be, but the more people that you're going to impact. But the other thing is, don't be afraid to stand up for yourself and speak your mind. So many times, and again, this generation may not ever have this issue, but I know in our generation, you know, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all was always said kind of in our house. And not that that's a bad one, but it's okay to it's okay to have an opinion. It's okay to differ from other people. Always approach everything with grace and with the intention to help someone, but don't be afraid to speak up and just be who you are. I think I hope I have granddaughters someday. And I have two boys, and I just have a hunch I'm going to have all granddaughters. We'll see. Let's come back to this podcast in about 20 years maybe. But I hope that, yeah, more than anything, if for little girls to just love who they are
Yeah,
unconditionally from the get-go, just changes
that's
the world.
that's beautiful, and I appreciate. Now I've got this on recording, so that's really going to be cool. But there's one other item I want to go to before we kind of go over into making a difference and pulling out some of your principles that you teach. And You've mentioned the term people pleaser a few times. And to me, one of the big challenges in the digital age are people that may have that, which is, it's not directly related, but it is related, that comparison
Hmm.
mindset. It's just too easy to do in the world we're in today. Whereas, we're dating ourselves a little bit. Back in the 80s, I had like three neighbors around me. We went to school and all that, and you could look at people, but where I grew up, everyone sort of looked the same, kind of. And so, but now we can compare ourselves to the world.
Yeah.
And I guess I would love for you. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt there are some people listening in, Michelle, that have that personality profile, that makeup, that gene, whatever we want to call it, of being a people pleaser. Can you just talk a little bit more about how that can manifest negatively, and
Hmm.
then how one can address it to make it a positive?
Yes, because
And
it
then
is
we'll
both.
move then we'll move along. It can be. Yeah, I mean, listen, we're wired for certain things. I think the Lord blesses us with certain skills. So it's not always a negative, but it really can be in the world we're in today because of the ability to compare so
It is.
easily.
Yeah, I mean, I think the desire to want to serve others, to make people happy is a good thing. But if it's at the expense of yourself, meaning if you are
Mm.
showing up as a person to make someone else happy, or if you're saying something in a certain way to make that other person happy, and it's hurting you, then that's there's inconsistency there. So it's a really fine line. When the way I describe it for myself growing up, I just wanted to be liked. I just wanted to, I don't like conflict. And I just, so sometimes I would adapt to the environment I was in. Nothing wrong with that. But there was several times that I wasn't authentic with myself. And I knew I didn't really like what I was saying or doing or who I was hanging out with. But I wasn't being authentic and letting them know that. So that's people pleasing in my mind. So I was at the expense of my happiness. I was trying to make someone in relationships, dating, all of those things play a part,
Mhm.
especially when you're younger. But there is the good side of it. I still want to be liked. I don't want people to hate me, right? But I think it's shifted a little bit more of, this is who I am. um I'm not gonna I am who I am, right? And there's things about me that I may not like, or other people don't like, but God made me. And I, whoever you are, however you've been made, it's exactly who you're supposed to be. So be proud of it, and don't be ashamed to step back. I think what it is, there's one of my favorite verses in Matthew is, a city on the hill cannot be hidden. And it's, all about shining your light, right? And what it means to shine your light is to just shine who you are, obviously through Christ, but it's not holding back. It's not like showing, okay, I'm just going to show this part of my life. I'm just going to show. It's just being who you were created to be. And I think that's when you approach life, that's the good side of people pleasing, right? You want to shine your light to make a difference in other people's lives, but not changing yourself to do so. I don't know if that's making sense or not, but
No, it absolutely does. I think that's beautiful because it really emphasizes the piece that is our faith, that goes with our personality, the way we were created. And so I love the way you worded that, because one of the things I say all the time is, an overused strength can become a weakness. Let's just
mhm,
say that, let's just say we enjoy speaking in front of groups. If we always gravitate towards that, that could become a weakness of ours. It's like, hey, if there's a microphone, I'm grabbing it. But
mhm.
but it's a skill that we've been given. So I agree with it. Actually, it's interesting. My wife has that personality. And
Yeah.
one of the things as her spouse that I have to watch out for, this is like real vulnerability time here, so I have to be careful, is that I can use her people pleasing. I don't want to say as a manipulation. That sounds really strong. I could use it to my advantage.
Yes.
And so we have to really be mindful of that, especially when we've got our partner and people we're around. So anyway, I think that's very valuable what you shared. And I'm going to use that to lead in to really, I think, our big topic here. And that is your specialty, your expertise, because it's really owning who you are and stepping into, I think the term you use, your power of authority.
Mhm.
And you've got all kind of great phrases here. I've got them written out, but I'm going to let you share them. I want you to talk first about how you came into that saying, and that is, I guess, seizing or bringing to fruition, manifestation, the power of your authority, because I know that that is a big message that you share. Talk to us about that.
Well, so it's the book that I wrote was called The Power of Authority. I wrote it in 2019, and it is a little bit of a play on words, whereas you can't spell authority without author. And I do love helping people to become authors, right? So there was that, and part of that book and that saying was really geared toward people that when you see that your book is your business card, and that when you are the authority, you are the authority by what you already do. So whether you're a dentist, a real estate agent, doctor, you know in ministry, you have all of this expertise. But to make it so easy for other people to recognize that expertise is when you write a book or share your story. When people know the backstory of what you do and why you do it, one, that connects you to people, but two, there is just something about being an author. I wish I could explain it. It's a phenomenon, but we put a lot of credibility in books and in authors. And so the power of authority is, leverage it. What all of the years you've been in school, all the things that you've learned, all the ministry work you've done, rather than just keep it to yourself, put it out there to help other people. But what you'll find is you'll be able to leverage it. So that's kind of where that started. I mean, there's a lot of different play on words. As a Christian, we have the authority, right? That we need to
Mhm.
recognize and claim our authority in Christ, and so there's that side of it too. But I always hesitate when I talk about the books because I do have a publishing company. I do love this, but at the end of the day, it's really not about a book. It's never been about a book. Because you can do the exact same thing like we're doing through a podcast. Your story can be showcased on a stage. A book just happens to open up a lot of doors. And for me, it happens to be the easiest way to get my story out initially. But it's not about the book. It's about your story and really seeing, who you are, the gifts that you have, what passions you have, what experiences, and how you can bring those together to make an impact. The only reason books exist is for the reader, essentially, for to help someone overcome something or learn something or get through something. So that's when I help people with stories, figuring out, well, what is it that you've been through, good or bad? What are you passionate about? What experiences do you have that you could share with someone else to help them down the road a little bit farther? And so that's a long answer to your short question, but the power of authority is there is leverage and taking all that you know and putting it in a book and becoming an author.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if it's your subtitle or anything, is find your passion, know your priorities, and share your story, which I've got it in my notes here in front of me in all caps for some reason. I don't know why I wrote it in all caps, but I love what you just said, Michelle, because I want the listener to hear this. Many times people will listen into a conversation like this. They know they've got something inside of them, and they will automatically go to what I call a tactical
Hmm.
solution, which is write a book. But I love what you said. It's like it could be that you need to get on stage. It could be that you need to build a big Instagram following or TikTok or some. There are so many avenues now. I hate to keep dating ourselves that weren't available 30
Yeah.
years ago for people to get their message out and share their story. And
Mhm.
this is kind of me, true confessions here. I have actually recently had this guilty pleasure of TikTok. And I was real negative about TikTok. Is that like too much to share here?
No, no.
You know what amazes me, Michelle, is how many super talented people there are out there that in 60 seconds they are sharing their talent with the world
Mhm.
right now.
Yes.
And before this vehicle, they had no way of doing that. And
Right.
I'll just sit there at night. I'll tell my wife, Glory, I said, Glory, we don't watch TV or anything. I said, I'm going to jump on TikTok. I'm going to do about 15 minutes and I'll watch something. I go, oh, you got to see this. And I'll turn it to her and she'll say, okay, I don't need to see everything. Because Michelle, there's so many ways that people can find their passion, know their priorities, and share their story, correct?
Totally. And obviously, we want to hear these stories. I think we're drawn to the true
Mm.
story, the backstory, who you are and why you do what you do. I mean, that's really what all of these platforms are, right? So there's never been a better time to have the freedom to just share who you are, share your story. And there's so many different avenues. I mean, that's a big part of, when we teach the power of authority, is it's building the platform. But the platform has a purpose. It's not just to have a platform to be famous or to make a lot of money, which those are not bad things, but the platform is what enables you to speak into somebody else's life. And it's the significance part of things. Like, right, there's success and then there's significance. And when you transition from just knowing something and being good at it to now sharing it in a way, like on a platform, now that's significance, because you're making an impact. And so you have to know your story. And I do believe putting in a book is one of the easiest ways to really open up a lot more opportunities, but you don't have to start there.
Yeah, and we'll talk in just a moment, maybe some basic steps to get started with that. But speaking of story, what I would love for you to share, I agree. I've seen people that, we talk about what a powerful business card, a book can be.
Yes.
I've actually been amazed at what's happened with this podcast.
Mm.
I've had a few mini celebrity experiences. It hasn't gone to my head though, don't worry about it. But, where people find out I have a podcast, which is just talking into a microphone as far as I'm concerned,
Mhm.
where they actually think it's a really big deal. But I know you've seen examples or stories of people that they were at one stage of the authority scale before the book,
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
after, it's almost like something happened. Can you share, I don't know if it's
Yeah.
just some people you've helped or examples?
Mhm.
Give a couple of stories or examples of people that went from, I'm doing this with my hands for people that are listening, you can't see, but like low on the authority scale, they had a skill, talent, a story to tell. All of a sudden, book comes out and they're like at an 8 or a 9 on the
Yeah.
authority scale. Share some of those, or at
Oh
least
my
one
gosh.
if you have it. May I
I
didn't
have
prep
so
you on that.
many.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm thinking I have so many. I mean, there's so many people, and it's the whole reason behind the power of authority, that this is, and when I was doing my podcast, which I'll bring back soon, but I was interviewing people on how are you leveraging the power of authority, because no matter who you are, there is something that happens when you have a platform. Like you said, yours is a podcast platform, an author platform. So some of the examples, I mean, we have so many different clients. One is I can think of as a doctor that, and he says that having a book was the number one best marketing initiative he'd ever done, that the results were in millions of dollars. Those are his words, not mine. So he was already successful in his own right, but what it did is it solidified him as the go-to authority in his particular niche. And that was one. I mean, people who have never even dreamed of speaking, and then all of a sudden they wrote a book, even if they wrote a book for their kids or something, like which is my story. I never intended really to build a business, but they write this book and then somebody finds out and then they get asked to come and speak and get paid. And then they're like, oh my gosh, what do I mean, I had one woman, actually, this was years ago. We helped her write a book about adoption, and it was something she was just going to do for her own. She just wanted to document her kids' stories. And one of the president of the largest adoption agency in the world somehow heard about that she wrote a book, because that's where she adopted through that agency, and reached out to her and asked her to come and speak at their annual conference. And by the way, we're offering to pay her a couple $1,000s, and then they bought a book for every single person in attendance. And I'll never forget the day she called me. She's like, Michelle, oh my gosh, you won't believe this. She's a stay-at-home mom. She's like, I just got a call and they're asking me to speak. What do I say? And I said, well, you say yes. And you do it. And she did. And so, there's so many stories. It's part of, I don't know. And I'll be bold and say this. I really don't know anyone who has ever written a book that has regretted it. Meaning, like, it takes most of us a really long time to get to that point to decide to do it. But when you finally get the courage and you finally put your story out there, in almost all cases that I can think of, usually that person will say, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I didn't do this sooner. Because,
Wow.
and it's not about the book, it's not about what it makes or what it sells for. It's more of like, I got a phone call from someone who read my book. I don't even know them. They said my story changed their life. I mean, things like that happen all the time. And there's just so much power in it. Yeah, it's
Wow.
selfish
Yeah.
in a way because you get more out of it than the people probably reading it. But
Yeah.
personally,
Well, the cool thing about it is you brought up with the doctor the monetary value, but
yes.
then
Oh, yeah.
there's sense of accomplishment. There's
Hmm.
the value. I mean, maybe feeds a little bit of our sense of significance. Got a quick
Yeah.
story for you that I think you'll love. We interviewed Mitzi Purdue, and if someone's listening in, that podcast is not going to release until mid-March, so it could be after this recording, but before this one's released. Go back and listen to it. But Mitzi Purdue is
Hmm.
from a long line of family from the Sheraton hotel chain. And she
Oh,
married into the Purdue family, which is Purdue Chicken. So there's two
wow.
legacy families that she is a part of.
Wow.
On one side of the family, I can't remember which one it is, but we talk about this in the episode. They require, before a family member hits their 60th birthday, that they write an autobiography.
Really?
And they made it, they don't have to
Wow.
publish it, but it becomes part of the archives of the family. How cool is that?
That is a great idea. I love that.
And it's just beautiful. She talked about it in the episode. So make sure, if you're listening in, and maybe you go in and listen, it's going to be released sometime in mid-March of
Okay.
2021. And then another one, and maybe you can talk about this, and then I'm going to tell you about a book I've got. We'll talk about that
Okay.
as we move towards finishing up. We've got a mutual friend,
Uh-huh.
Mark MJ. He was actually interviewed on this podcast. He and I've known each other for 20 years. And if anyone wants to listen to that episode, go back to spring of 2020. Very successful in real estate, but he's also an Ironman. And I know you and your company, y'all are helping him right now bring the story that's beyond his real estate to life. So I know he wouldn't mind, but just tell a little bit about what the process is like. Because I work with him. He and I've known each other for a long time, so I
Mhm.
know he won't mind sharing. So give a little glimpse of what that looks like when you're working with someone like MJ.
Oh, MJ, what an incredible man, family, everything. Well, yeah. So, you know what? He's doing the heavy lifting. It's his story. He's getting it out of his head onto paper. In fact, he had already started a project before. So, we're kind of helping revise and republish something that has been there, maybe kind of the next version of it. But, the process isn't hard. The hardest part is figuring out what your story is and figuring out what it is that you could put into a book. But the actual publishing of it, what we're doing for him is the, we call it more partner publishing, because we're just partners with you to try to help get that book produced and out there as quickly and as professionally as possible. But like the editing and the publishing and all that stuff. But that's kind of what we're doing for him. And then for anybody else who isn't even at that point of publishing, we also will help with figuring out, well, what is my story? And that's my favorite thing to do, because I could honestly, and I do believe this, I could, if I had 15 minutes with anyone, I could probably pull out their core story. I always use that word core story because we all have things we could talk about, but it's like, who are you really? Your core story is just who you are. It's who God made you to be. It's what you're passionate about. And it doesn't take long to figure that out. Um, for ourselves to figure it out, it takes years. It took me decades,
Yeah,
but for
yeah.
someone else to,
It's amazing thing. I'm a coach. I work with executives, leaders, and people like MJ and other people like that. I can do it with other people all day long. I sometimes
I
struggle with
know,
myself, so that's really
I
a
know, I
cool thing.
know.
All right, with MJ, I'm going to be working with him on the marketing and all the business things that are going to spin off for it. So I'm excited to see that process. But
Awesome.
this is kind of confession time for me, part 2 or 3 or whatever. A few years ago, I felt compelled to write a book,
Okay.
and the book is written, it is finished, and it is sitting on my desktop, and the only people that have seen it are inside this RV and a couple other people. Now,
Mm,
it's a little bit different, which might be a good time for you to speak to this. It's
okay.
actually a novel. It
Oh,
would not be a leadership book, which probably should have been the first thing I wrote, or something on business or our successes or how we went from $1 million companies to
Mhm.
homeless to living. It's nothing like that. It actually is a novel.
Okay.
So go ahead and speak to, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just kind of open up right now for you to coach me a little bit on what I might should do next.
Well, I will preface it by saying 99% of the books we do are nonfiction, but the process
Yes.
to publish is the same. Do you feel good about the content? Do you feel good about the manuscript?
Yeah,
Okay.
I feel pretty good about it.
What's your ultimate goal? Why? What do you want to see happen as a result of getting this book out there?
I want to impact people's thought processes with everything I do. This
Hmm.
podcast, my book, all of that. And you'll get a kick out of this. The book is in the same genre as Augmendino books. It would be
Oh,
in the
okay.
Augmendino book, modern day parables, modern day
Love
stories
that.
to make a point and to tell a story with purpose. That's really kind of the method
Those are the
behind my
best
book.
kind.
Yeah.
So, do you want to, how do you want to bring it to life? Do you want to work with a publisher? Do you want to try to find a traditional publisher? Do you want to self publish or not
You
sure?
know, that's a great question, Michelle. Thank you for asking it. And I think this is valuable for the listener because they probably go through similar things.
Hmm.
I'm a control person. So many times I
Hmm.
like to control things. That
Hmm.
can be a disadvantage or advantage in life. I think most people know that. And my wife and I have self-published some books,
Okay.
and they have gotten out there, but probably haven't done extremely well. And then I also don't like to fool myself in thinking that I have such a platform that a traditional publisher would really be
Hmm.
interested. Maybe I'm selling myself short. Maybe I just don't
Right.
want to be rejected. I don't know. So in answer to your question, that's what goes through my head.
Yeah.
Would I love it for someone to come knock on my RV door and say, "Hi, Tim, we hear you have a book. We would like to
Yes.
publish it for you." That would be awesome, but I
Yeah.
also have to communicate with people to actually do that. How's that for an answer?
Absolutely. No, it's good. And there's so many different ways to get to the same result. That's why I always ask those questions because it really
Mhm.
depends. But I will say one thing that's a big misconception with publishing in general, regardless if you self-publish, hybrid publish, or traditionally publish, is that traditional publishers will market it for you. And it's actually not true unless
Mm.
you do have a huge platform, you're a celebrity, or but they really aren't marketing it the way you would think, meaning they're relying on the platform that author already established. So any particular person that gets picked up, that's a requirement. So you're still doing the marketing. So my personal take on this now, I'm a little biased because I created a whole company around this bias, but when I was writing my first book, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know anything about publishing. And I had some connections through some Ziglar friends that had traditional publishers. I spoke to one or two of them, and I had a proposal. And I remember thinking to myself, well, wait, I'm doing all the work to write the book. Um, it's my story. Like, it's my life story. It's not yours. And in the agreement, they were going to own the rights to my story and take a huge amount of the profit. So I thought, I just had a moment. I knew nothing about publishing at the time, but I was like, well, wait a minute. All they're doing is hiring editors and designers, and I can do that. I can figure this out. How hard can it be? Well, it's a little harder than I thought, but it was a shift for my thinking, and that's why I changed it. So my opinion usually, now this generally is for nonfiction authors, if you are using the book to make a difference, to build a platform, to get it out in as many people as possible, um, then you should really consider hybrid publishing or self-publishing, because you can do it immediately, meaning you don't have to wait 2 years to get picked up by a literary agent to shop it to get picked up. You don't have to give up any rights to your royalties at all. I mean, rights to the book or your royalties. Some hybrid publishers do, we don't, but or even self-publishing, because nowadays you get the exact same quality as you would as a traditional publisher. In many cases, hybrid publishers are working with the same printers. So in my that's my view, and it is a little tainted, but if your goal, though, I will back up to say, if your goal was to be in every Barnes and Noble in the world, or to walk in and you know That would be the biggest one. Or to be that New York Times bestseller. Can it be done hybrid and self? Absolutely. Is it more difficult? Yes. So if that's the goal, then going down a traditional route is usually the better way to go.
Yeah.
I have friends, colleagues who are traditional publishers, and I also have other colleagues who are hybrid publishers. We all do it a little bit different. And there are certain times I say, you know what, do not self-publish this, do not hybrid, go straight to this person and they're going to help you out. And other
Yeah.
times I'm like, why would you do that? So that's why I ask those questions, because it just depends.
The reason I like that is that maybe in the back of my little mind here, I do have thoughts of movies and other things like that. And so, and there's about 30 more books behind this first book that will be,
Yeah.
released and brought to fruition in pretty rapid succession. So,
And fiction, you have a better chance of getting picked up than nonfiction, I will
yeah.
say. That's a whole
So,
other story, but
so all right, enough about me. What I would love to do as we wrap up here is let's help the listener who's sitting here going, okay, I might have a story that I need to bring to the world. I would love for you to give a few quick tips or two on next steps for them. Let's say
okay.
they don't have anything on paper yet, because I do have some things. I've taken these two fingers and I've written 75,000 words. So anyway, I'd love to kind of talk about that in a different way. I hear alarms going off somewhere here in the RV. So something's happening. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, let's talk. Let's as we finish up here, the listener that's going, wow, I might have a story. What
Mhm.
should I do next? And then we'll move into kind of my last few questions, which is how people can connect with you, because I know you've got book bound and other things like that that people can get. So
Yeah.
coach that
Okay.
person that's thinking.
I'd love to. So this is what we do for all of our authors, whether they come through an event or we publish their book, is we start with, well, what is my story? Finding your topic is one of the hardest things, because most people have all of these ideas and it's really hard to narrow it in, or you can't see why anyone would care, about that particular part of your story. So this is a great exercise. Grab a sheet of paper, just draw a T chart on it. And on the left-hand side of the T, just write the word passions. This is what we do for everyone. You could do this on chicken scratch. On the right-hand side of that T, you write the word experiences. Now, thinking only about passions right now, think about, and this isn't about a book yet, by the way, this has nothing to do with the book, but it will get there, I promise. Think about passion, like what are you passionate about? What do you love to do? What are you doing when the time is flying by? What lights you up? Whether it's cooking or traveling or personal development or leading people, or you name it, just anything that comes to mind, you want to write it down. And the more you put on this list, the better. So that's the first part. Then the second part is kind of erase your mind of your passions and now only think about your experiences. What experiences have you had with work professionally? What experiences have you had? Are you a parent? Have you traveled? Own a business, you name it, right? So you're going to write all those things down. But then here's the tricky part about experience. Experience doesn't have to be something that we wanted to experience, but we still experienced it, right? So a lot of times our story includes things that were painful: divorce, bankruptcy, abuse, low self-esteem, all of these different things. It's not that you're writing a book about that, trust me, but it is just who you are. It's a part of your story. So it has to go in that experience column. And again, the more you put on that list, the better. Once you have both lists and you look at them holistically and you just look at them overhead and try to find a connection. I always say it's the intersection. Your best story, the best book for you to write is the intersection between your passions and your experiences. So what are you passionate about that you also have experienced? I'll give you an example using mine. So I shared my story about going to Zig's conference when I was 18, and I am passionate about personal development. Like if I go to the bookstore, you're going to find me in the personal development or the professional development section all the time. That's just me. I love seminars, all that. So I'm very passionate about that. I love helping people to find their best selves. So it's a passion. Now on my experience side, well, I did work for Zig Ziglar. That's a connection because, here he was the master of personal development. Everything I know about personal development, I learned from him. So there's a connection there. But I'm going to share something to be very vulnerable, and I don't mind doing it because it will help somebody. is when I was younger, I mentioned being a people pleaser. So when I was in elementary or in junior high and high school, and maybe even a little bit into college, I had low self-esteem. And I think that's what caused me to be a people pleaser. But, I'm not proud of that. I'm not something I want to tell the world, even though I'm telling this podcast. But I have to put it on my experience category because it really shaped a lot of who I am today. It shaped the decisions I made. It shaped the relationships I had. So it's just a part of my story. It goes on my list. Now, we're going back to that intersection. I'm passionate about personal development. And on my experience side, I have low self esteem, or I did. I had to use personal development to get me out of that. I had to read books. I had to attend seminars. I had to get my mind right. And so there's a connection there. And that happened to be what my first book was about. My first book was called Winning in Life Now: How to Break Through to a Happier You. And it wasn't a story about me being a winner in life. It was just my personal story and my ups and downs in life and how I used personal development to kind of pull me out of some things. And oh, by the way, I shared a few things I learned from Zig. That's your story. And so kind of the goal of that, what you'll find is you'll have tons of connections, tons of them, if you do it right. But where you start is like, what's your core? What do you really, I could talk about personal development. I could talk about this stuff all day. I could talk about helping people find their story because it's connected to finding who they truly are. So that's your story. And that's a great exercise to give you the clarity. If nothing else, if you say, well, I don't want to write a book, that's okay. You will see who you are because you are a combination of your passions, your experiences. Those things were given to you by God, and they're gifts. And if you think of it as gifts are meant to be given away, that's why you put it in a book or a podcast or you put it out on a platform.
Yeah, the reason I really enjoy what you just said, Michelle, because you're correct. I mean, personal development, leadership, all of those things,
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of people that can talk about that, but they can't merge it with the personal story
Yes.
that you just brought up. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. I mean, I can sit down, leadership, something I've always been around, personal
Mm-hmm.
development also, and you and I can probably spout off personal development things, but until we make it personal,
Yeah.
I don't think it opens up. I mean, Jesus did that. He spoke in parables. He
I
told
know.
stories to
Yes.
get principles across. So that is so good, Michelle. And I think what I would love for you to do now while we are at this peak moment is go ahead and tell people how they can connect with you. I know you've got seminars, you've got training, you've got some free resources, all of that.
Yeah.
Go ahead and let's just let people know how to do that. I'll ask a question or so and we will wrap here because I think for the one that really is feeling that tug to get their story out, they just need to know their next
Mhm.
steps. So share with
Yeah.
people what that might be.
Absolutely. Well, you can find me at michelleprince.com. That's my main website. Performancepublishinggroup.com, though, that has more details of really, what that looks like. What is the power of authority? You can schedule a strategy session, a free strategy session, if you have an idea for a book. But I'm also on Facebook and Instagram and all of those. I'm not the best on social media, not as good as I should be. But again, I'm in my lane. I don't, yeah. But you can find me and I will definitely get back to anybody that reaches out. But I would love to help for no other reason, even if you don't want to write a book, but just to have confidence in your story, your backstory. You asked me my elevator story when I first started, right? If it gives somebody the ability to do that, then it's all worth it.
Yeah, just to gain clarity there.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for everything, Michelle. Final question I like to ask. I don't know if I prepped you on this, so maybe this might be is we are
Uh-oh.
Seek, Go, Create is the title of our
Mm-hmm.
show. And I like to ask which one of those words, pick one,
Mm-hmm.
resonates the most with you and why. And that's our final question.
Without a doubt, it's create. I used to think it was a curse, not a gift, because I was constantly creating. I have no lack of ideas. It's just maybe a lack of implementation sometimes. But I realized, and I read a great book by Jordan Rayner. that I'm the title is just escaping me, but it's about
Mastery.
creating
It's
it.
something about mastery is his podcast, but yeah, I know Jordan, so that'd be
Hmm.
great. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I can't believe, but it's about creating, and it's
wow.
all about that God, the Creator, created us in His image. So we are creation. We are supposed to create and come up with new ideas, and 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 you just never know how your one idea or your one story or your podcast or something is going to change somebody else's life. So, yeah, create for sure is the word for me.
Wow. Michelle, thank you. Thank you so much. I knew I would enjoy this conversation, and I have. My only regret is that we couldn't do it for another hour or two, but maybe another time. If you've listened in, I know this has been a blessing to you. And if it has, I'm going to ask a big favor. Please share it. If you're listening on podcast, if you're on YouTube, if you're on any of the socials, please share this. I know that you know someone that has a message, a story that needs to get out, either via book or any of the other principles that we discussed. So just share it with them. I believe it'll help stir something inside that person that will help them. Maybe it's you, but I think there's other people too. Please just share it. Help us get this message out. And we just ask you to continue listening to Seek, Go, Create. Every Monday, we have new episodes. So we will have that again next week. And until then, continue being all that you were created to be.